Welcome to the regular council meeting of Tuesday, September 16th, 2025 at 4:40 p.m. in council chambers and via Zoom. We acknowledge that the town of Kirkland Lake is located on traditional and unceded territory of Indigenous peoples. We recognize the presence of these Indigenous peoples in our land since time immemorial and honor their stewardship and care of these lands. We hereby affirm our continued commitment and responsibility to reconciliation. Call to order at 4:40 in a moment of silence. Item number 2, approval of the agenda, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Owens.
Be it resolved that the agenda for the regular meeting of council held on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025 be approved as circulated. And finally, that section 15 of procedural bylaw number 1575 as amended be suspended to allow for a recess to hold a public meeting prior to the commencement of regular business noted in section 4 petitions and delegations.
All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Item number 3, declaration of pecuniary interest. None noted. We will now take that recess for the open public meeting. Welcome to the public meeting for proposed amendments to council's procedural bylaw in council chambers and via electronic participation on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025 at 4:40 in council chambers at 3 Kirkland Lake Street West. Item number 1 is call to order. Item number 2, declaration of pecuniary interest. None noted at the table. Item number 3, summary of reports. This supplemental proposed amendments to council procedure bylaw will be presented by Municipal Clerk Jennifer Montoy. You may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. To start, every municipal council is legislated under section 238 of the Municipal Act to have a procedural bylaw to govern its proceeding and those of its committees and boards, which excludes the library board and the OPP detachment board and the committee of adjustment. The procedural bylaw is used as a tool for council and its committees and boards to determine the structure of meetings, roles, and responsibilities of members and voting procedures. On July 22nd, council was presented with a rewrite of its current procedural bylaw, which was approved in 2015 with 3 formal amendments. Once in 2016 to enhance section 21 to denote that the minutes are taken without note or comment. Twice in 2020 to allow for the general housekeeping of procedures surrounding electronic participation in meetings, including hybrid participation during the pandemic and post-pandemic. There was also 1 informal amendment surrounding the inclusion of the reading of the land acknowledgement statement prior to the call of the business of council meetings. The 2021 recommendations from the Ombudsman's report were addressed in the language intended for the new bylaw, which was to ensure that the general nature of matters to be discussed in close be identified in the resolution. Sections 238 and 239 of the Municipal Act regarding open meetings and the new part 6.1 of the Municipal Act stemming from the Strong Mayors and Building Homes Act were factored into the rewrite. Between July 22nd and August 26th, minor typographical and styling amendments were made to the various sections and schedules of the draft bylaw. On August 26th, Committee of the Whole were presented with short summaries of modifications. Committee and staff noted general amendments and recommended that a survey be held between August 29th and September 12th, and that a public meeting be held this evening to allow for the public to comment on the most recent draft of the bylaw. 41 respondents participated in the survey. 13 questions were posed focusing on public interactions with council, and the survey results were presented as a report attached for public consumption this evening. Given that I summarized these in my report, I'll not reiterate them this evening. However, worth noting is that there were general consensus on the draft, specifically the ease of meetings, timing, location, notice, and proposed changes to the meetings and the creation of town hall meetings. Based on some comments received, staff are investigating the cost of circulating public notices as part of the weekly flyers that accompany the local newspaper. And starting this evening, the live stream of this meeting is available in real time on the town's official Facebook page. Given the results of the survey, administration found it prudent to place the draft bylaw on the regular council agenda for 3 readings this evening, as so directed by committee. This evening's public meeting is another opportunity for those who may or may not have participated in the survey to get their opinion heard and on the record before council conducts its reading of its proposed bylaw for passage. If it is the will of council to proceed with the draft bylaw as presented on the council agenda this evening, in terms of education on the changes that impact the public, the clerk's office will be undertaking a review of the content on the town's official website prior to the next regular meeting, updating backend agenda management software, and will be conducting an education campaign through the local government week, which is scheduled October 19th to the 25th. Thank you, Madam Chair. That is the end of my summary.
Thank you. Item number 4, confirmation of notice. How was notice given, Madam Clerk?
Notice of the public meeting was given in accordance with the town of Kirkland Lake's previous notice bylaw, which was 2247. By publishing said notice on the town's website more than 14 days in advance of August 29th, 2025. Supplemental notice was also published through the town's various social media streams and the municipal update and within local radio broadcasts.
Thank you. Item number 5, correspondence received. Madam Clerk, was there any correspondence received from members of the public surrounding the proposed amendments to council procedure bylaw?
Madam Chair, I confirm that there was no correspondence received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Item number 6, comments, questions from members of the public. Before we do begin, I would like to remind all members of council that this is a public meeting and therefore there is no discussion or debate with members of the public. Madam Clerk, has anyone registered to provide comments or pose questions in person or electronically?
Madam Chair, confirmed that no one has asked the clerk's office to register a request to participate electronically in this public meeting.
Okay, thank you. I will now invite any members of the public to come up to the podium and give their input. Just a reminder that if you are to speak, can you please state your name and address for the clerk to record? And seeing that there is no public input this evening, we shall move on. Thank you very much. Item number 7, consideration of proposed bylaw. Madam Clerk, please read the directions stemming from this public meeting.
That council received the comments, questions from members of the public, and that the updated procedure draft bylaw be brought forward for 3 readings at the September 16th regular meeting of council.
Thank you. Item number 8 is adjournment. This concludes the public meeting for the proposed amendments to council procedure bylaw. Okay, now we will resume the regular council meeting. Item number 5, acceptance of minutes and recommendations. 5.1, council minutes September 2nd, 2025, moved by Councillor Owen and seconded by Councillor Kylie.
Be it resolved that council approve the minutes of the following meeting, minutes of the regular meeting of council held September 2nd, 2025.
All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Item 5.2, committees of council minutes. Minutes TPR committee, May 26, 2025, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Owen.
Be it resolved that council adopt the minutes of the following meeting, minutes of the Tech Pioneer Residence Committee of Management held May 26, 2025.
All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Item number 6, reports of municipal officers and communications. 6.1, asset management plan update, phase 4. This will be presented by Lloyd Crocker, treasurer, and Sean LeClerc, director of corporate services, and Alexa Wild, PSD of Citywide Inc., senior asset management advisor and team lead, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Kylie.
Be it resolved that report number 2025 Corp 22 entitled Asset Management Plan Update Phase 4 be received, and that council approve the updated asset management plan as presented, and finally that the updated asset management plan be posted on the town of Kirkland Lake's official list.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. You may proceed.
Aaron, through you to council. I would like to give Alexa an opportunity to give her summary of the work the consultant has gone through and help that they provided us in updating the asset management plan at this point. There is a presentation which will be on the screen. I think you also have a paper copy summary of the 200-page plan. Go ahead, Alexa.
Thank you very much. My name is Alexa Wild. I am a senior asset management advisor here at PSD Citywide. I have been working with Kirkland Lake for the last few years on their last asset management plan, and now this updated 2025 asset management plan. So to begin, I just want to give a bit of background that the reason that we do all of this asset management planning is, of course, because it's great to plan for the future, but also it is a regulatory requirement under Ontario Regulation 58817. I would like to give a big thank you to Sean, Lloyd, and Alina for their dedication and their work over the last year in helping to create this plan. As a quick review, there's been multiple milestones required under the Ontario regulation, starting with your asset management policy, moving into core assets and non-core assets over the last few years. Looking back at what we refer to as current levels of service, that is a reflection looking back at the state of the infrastructure, how much you own, how much it's worth, what condition it's in. And the biggest difference in this next phase that was required is it had a focus on what is referred to as proposed levels of service. This is more forward-looking, saying we know what we should be doing to reach this ideal, but is that right for our community? And can we balance affordability with our infrastructure, making sure that we're providing the services that we need without creating too much of a burden on the municipality's finances. So this is a quick review over the proposed levels of service. But in order to understand that, just a very quick snapshot of the state of the infrastructure and a recap of where we currently are. The municipality does own almost $1 billion worth of infrastructure if it were to be required to be replaced today at today's dollars. You can see that your utility infrastructure for a sanitary and water network is about half of that amount. And we do see that is a pretty consistent figure across municipalities in Ontario, with the road network falling third with still $150 million worth of infrastructure. And overall, we see a pretty even spread amongst the assets within the town's portfolio, where you've got about 50% of the assets considered in fair or better condition and 50% in poor or worse condition. And we do see this again pretty typically because you don't want to replace things too prematurely and you're not actually realizing their full value, but you want to have a good balance so that not too much of your infrastructure falls into the orange or red categories here. So in an ideal world, this is the level of infrastructure reinvestment that we would be looking at. So we've forecasted out over 70 years, averaging about $18.5 million a year of investment required to reach the ideal for every asset in your portfolio. That means that if a pickup truck, for example, was expected to last 10 years, that it is replaced 10 years on the dot. There is no consideration for stretching, whether we can squeeze a few more years out of it. Can we patch something to make it last longer? So that's where the past asset management plans have really focused on this ideal of $18.5 million. We understand that that is an extremely high investment to require out of limited municipal funds. And that is why we based our proposed levels of service based on some more realistic financial considerations. So as I said, this is a new requirement for 2025, and we hope that moving into the future that this will make it a little more realistic as opposed to reaching for this unicorn that we may never get to. We want to make sure that our goals are actually attainable. So what are proposed levels of service? The current level of service looks at the past performance metrics. So that is your conditions as they are today or projected to what they would be today. Whereas the proposed levels of service will show if we do X, what happens? If we do Y, what happens? And how far into the future does that happen? So the Ontario regulation does not dictate how you need to look at your proposed levels of service, just that you need to look into the future to make sure that it meets your specific community's political desires, resident desires, financial capacity, and that is very individualized to every individual municipality. So we did model 3 different scenarios for Kirkland Lake. So the first scenario is looking at cutting the funding to about half. So from that ideal, if we only had 50% of the available funding, what would happen in the long term? I will talk about growth in just a second. The second scenario is, what does it look like if we targeted 75% of that ideal? And the third scenario is, what does it look like if we targeted the whole shebang, the ideal 100% funding scenario? When we look at these, there are obviously going to be pros and cons. The more you invest, obviously the better condition your infrastructure is going to be in the long term. However, that is balanced by very high burdens on your businesses and your residents by increasing those property taxes and rates. So what we discussed was, we understand that there are some risks with underfunding infrastructure from the ideal, but that risk tolerance is very specific to each municipality. So we did go with scenario 1, which was a 50% funding target, but also we wanted to make sure that we also included a dedicated growth fund. So we did recommend a slight tax increase to fund some of the unknowns that are expected to come in the indeterminate future. We're not exactly sure when they're going to hit, but my understanding is that in the area there is proposed industrial development, which would require an expansion of housing and services, which means more roads, more sewers, more water mains, more residents using facilities, etc. So even though we don't have dedicated growth projects right now, we want to make sure that there is a start of some level of funding so that we can pay for those growth initiated projects as they come along. So here's an example. This is just based on the current infrastructure, not the growth portion, but this is the modeled scenario for equipment, just as an example. So in this scenario, you can see that we have 3 different lines. The top line is targeting 100% funding, which is about $1.2 million per year. 75% funding would be about $900,000 a year, and the 50% funding is about $600,000 a year. And as you can see, conditions are going to be better with more funding. However, balancing, you're still staying on average above that very poor condition by investing that 50% funding target. And as I mentioned before, this doesn't necessarily take into account squeezing a few extra years out. What band-aids can we put on, which may be coming from an operating budget, whereas this is just accounting for capital investment. So the financial strategy, we did compare the 3 different scenarios that we modeled. And with going with scenario 1, which is the 50% targeted funding plus an additional growth fund, it is recommended for an annual tax increase of about 1.5% a year. And 0.7% of that is to help increase the funding available to existing assets, and then 0.8% for growth, which would be a completely separate fund meant specifically for those projects that would be triggered in the future should the town realize its growth, requiring those expansion of services. For water rates, it would be an increase of 1.5%, And for wastewater rates, it would be about 4% a year. And these scenarios were modeled over a 20-year period to make sure that we aren't dumping a huge burden in a single year or in a very short period of time on residents, because we do understand that it is difficult financial times, whether you are an individual, a business, or a municipality. So one thing to keep in mind is that these do only take into consideration sustainable funding. And when we refer to sustainable funding, we are talking about taxes or recurring grants that are, quote, guaranteed. So in this case, we are looking at CCBF funding and OSIF funding coming from the province. Whereas this does not take into account any one-time or short-term grant funding that may be available. That would be above and beyond what we are projecting here. So in the next 10 years, although we are looking at modeling this over a 20-year implementation period, this is a snapshot of the first 10 years of this implementation. If you do follow the 1.5% tax increase per year that is being recommended. And as you can see, in 2026, we're looking right around $3 million worth of capital dedicated revenues. Whereas by those incremental increases, by 2035, you're reaching almost 7 million dedicated towards capital projects. And I do have to emphasize that your capital budgets every year are going to fluctuate. Some years are going to have much bigger projects and some years much smaller, but we do when we model these, require that if you have excess funds because it's a smaller budget year, that those excess funds don't get reallocated into additional projects. The intention is that they would go back into a reserve to fund those major projects that may be coming 2, 3, 4, 10 years in the future that you need to be saving for. So our key recommendations from this asset management plan are your administrative team is doing a great job of keeping up the asset inventory, and we of course encourage continuance of that. Making sure that the software is updated because you want as accurate of predictions as you can make, and that requires updates to condition assessments and replacement costs to help make sure that we have increased confidence in the data that we are presenting. Asset management is a living document, so we always encourage continuous improvement. Asset management will never be perfect because there will always be some data refinement that can be done or changes to long-term planning. So we know that this is an ongoing process. We want to encourage that the yearly operating budget is taking into account any asset management needs, whether there are some condition assessments that are outside of the capabilities of administration that we want to bring in a third party for, or any engineering support, that is considered within the operating budget. And one thing that we did note during the project is that the overall needs of utilities for water and sanitary, it's very difficult to pin down a recommended rate increase because there are so many ways that you can break down utility rates, whether that be meter fees or usage fees or flat rates, and who gets charged what. So we do recommend looking into a dedicated water wastewater rate study to give you those options as to how you can reach those ideal funding levels. And lastly is just continuing to measure levels of service and the metrics that are identified within the asset management plan to ensure that you can report back between administration and council and have those conversations about whether we are meeting our goals or whether our goals need to change. Because, as I said, it's a living document, and we don't expect that there will be no changes during that 20-year implementation period, but we still want to work towards that goal. So I do understand that that was a very brief overview, but I am happy to answer any questions that council has.
Thank you. Gentlemen, do you have anything to add before I open the table?
I'd just like to point out that I will be talking a little bit about this after Alexa's done, so some of these questions I might kind of take back and take a run at myself, depending on what they are.
Do any members have questions for our presenter at this time? Counselor Ranger?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, it might not be a question for Alexa, more for Lloyd, just to be clear. These increases are above and beyond what we would need to have a balanced budget, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
Madam Mayor, that's 100% correct.
thank you.
Counselor Owen?
Yes, so your worship, in reading the study, I was very pleased to see something that I've been advocating for ever since I've been on council. Mentioned several times, and that is increased data, so we don't just use the age of a piece of equipment or the age of a vehicle to scrap it. I'm not sure where we are along on that process, but I'm glad to see that the consultants we hired also recognize that that's an important, to have as much data as possible so we don't replace things. And I will give you an example. When I went to AMO in London, Ontario, a few years ago, I went to the representative of one of the two major ice resurfacing manufacturer who makes that equipment. And I asked him how long that equipment should last. And he said, well, 8 to 10 years is your best trade-in value. I said, no, that's not what I asked. He said it should last 30 years if properly maintained. And we've been replacing every 10 years. So having the data to see what's wrong with the equipment, because you can get a lemon. We all know about lemons. Then we can make a decision based on facts, not other information. The other thing I'm concerned about is we all know the conditions of the roads because we drive on them. But I suspect that the conditions of our water pipes and our water mains is as bad as the roads, if not worse. We are now having water main breaks during all seasons. I'm wondering if that 1.5% increase is a realistic number, considering the amount of problems that we are having. And I know it's difficult to estimate because unlike the roads, you can't drive on the water mains and say, oh, this one needs replaced. But I suspect that 1.5%, as much as I hate increases, may in fact be low.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any questions for the presenters? For the presenter? None at this time. I do want to sincerely thank you for joining us this evening. We do appreciate all your work, and I can say honestly, the difference reading the asset management first to reading it this time around, I definitely want to acknowledge that we have been working very diligently, this council, towards better asset management in our budgets and in our considerations. So I do appreciate your work, and trust me, we are using your recommendations. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Madam Mayor, there is a report in your package that was prepared by us. I won't go through every little detail. I'll just kind of hit on a couple of things and point some stuff out. I really do want to emphasize how helpful PSTU is to us. The idea of moving to a levels of service model it doesn't sound maybe as big a step as it actually is. It's a huge step. It has an awful lot of detail that we didn't have in the asset management plan even last year. The one you saw last fall. It's hardly perfect, and speaking somewhat to the councilor's comments, there are still an awful lot of assets in this model that are based on old figures. And some of that we'll get to over the next couple of years. Some of them may never get much better. It is just very difficult to come up with replacement values for things when we're not even sure what we have under the ground in some places. So, you know, that's just kind of a generic thing. Most of the values in this report are 2023 values, and that's just a function of when we lock down data and when we can add stuff to it. You will see an example was included in the report about the fire hall. You'll see an example of what 2023 said to replace the building as it stands right now, the exact same type of, you know, brick and mortar type building versus what you've seen in the fire report. So, you know, that type of issue, I'll call it, exists in many places within our assets where what we have now isn't necessarily what we're gonna end up replacing with down the road. Also, some of the tools we're going to use, we're not going to be doing nearly as much digging up of roads and replacement. We're gonna use lining wherever we can to try and keep these costs down. You know, so some of those realities are a little bit more built into this new model. But we're a long ways from saying all of our assets have a nice clean path for replacement and we know exactly what it's gonna cost to do it. We may never get there, but we'll get better every year, and this is a pretty significant step. I'd like to comment on the 50% thing. That's the first time we've seen that since we've gone to an asset management plan. And I think that's just more a function of our reality. We have not funded even at 50% historically, so we're working to get to that. I think it's a big recognition that, like most small municipalities, we rely heavily on outside grants to do an awful lot of our infrastructure work. So trying to get the 100% model from the tax base, the tax ratepayers versus recognizing that there will be some money. How much it is at this point, we don't know. Whether we could tap into some of those pools, we're not sure of. We know how much we get per year. There's two capital funding models that exist right now. And they're built into this model, the amount that we get every year from the levels of government. But, you know, much like Connecting Link, we don't know when something's gonna show up that's gonna help us and we have to take advantage of it. That's roads and storm sewer infrastructure being mostly paid for by an outside funding. So that's part of the reason of the 50%. And we'll be honest about this. The other part of the 50% is we have somewhat of a limited ability to get to that 100%. We would end up putting a tremendous amount of pressure on our ratepayers that really nobody could afford. Doesn't matter what pay bracket you're in. There's another new concept in this model, and that's the idea of growth. So we haven't talked about that, but I think everybody understands sitting around in this room today is that we're anticipating growth. The mining industry in particular is just going crazy. We hear all kinds of plans about new employees coming to the area. We're seeing growth right now in our industrial area right now, and that's gonna be new jobs and people living in Kirkland Lake. So we know there's gonna be some point where we're gonna be either, you know, building infrastructure to build new houses, new, whatever it might be, commercial, anything. So we're building this in the recognition that this is coming. We just can't put a clear finger on what that means yet, but we know there's growth happening and we wanna kind of build that into the model somewhat. I think that was kind of the main, the differences that you'd seen that necessarily from last year. With regard to the idea, again, I'll emphasize it, you know, we are now close to $1 billion in assets. And the biggest part of the leap from last year, which was closer to $500 million in assets, was our not our storm system, our sewage system. We ran a very large project that finished in 2022 for moving sewage from Swastika to Kirkland to the town itself. And we were able to update an awful lot of our replacement costs because the pipe we put in is the same pipe we use around town. The pumps are very similar. We had good numbers. And I think, you know, on that scale that you saw about how, you know, sewer was much bigger than water, I doubt that is the reality. Water is probably very similar, if not the same to sewer. We just haven't run that kind of a project to say that's what it costs to put a kilometer of water pipe in Kirkland Lake with all the blasting that we do, and which is not the same as some of our southern neighbors or even some of our northern neighbors who don't have the rock that we do. So, you know, we have a lot more than $1 billion worth of replacement costs sitting out there in our community. This is kind of where we are right now with what we've identified. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments from members of council? Counselor Owens?
Through Madam Mayor, I'm having a hard time. I don't know, processing, accepting the report or. Or voting in favor of it. I don't know if it's just me or. There's so many unknowns. That. To me, yeah, it looks good on paper. Yeah, we need an asset management plan. We need to check a box somewhere because like someone in Toronto decided that all of these municipalities need a plan moving forward. But there's, to use an analogy Alexa used, there's so many band-aids that have been put on to this municipality by no fault of anybody in this room, so I don't want anybody to feel there's a target on their backs because of what I'm saying. And all these band-aids are coming out at the same time, so yeah, you can say you're gonna take so much money off taxes to do this stuff, and I know it's a hypothetical, but we're at one pipe burst somewhere, or 4 of them in 1 year or in 1 week to change the whole plan. So. Yeah, I can vote for it, but I know it's unreal, or I feel it's unrealistic to even think that we'll be able to follow this in any way. I'm afraid it's just gonna fall to the wayside and not be irrelevant 2 months down the road. Like, I don't know if it's just me or am I reading it wrong, or that's just how I feel about it.
Madam Mayor, to the councillor, you're not wrong. This is a document that is heavily estimate based. Much of the numbers in here are just our best guesses, our educated guesses. I gave you an example a few minutes ago of how the difference between what water and sewer are sitting at right now. Our reality is water's a bigger number in that thing, but we're not there yet because we don't have that information. Another example will be, you know, our sewer treatment plant. When it collapsed and suddenly we had to find tens of millions of dollars. You know, we were fortunate the insurance came through for us. But there's an example where in the model, it said we're gonna replace that plant at a certain point in time, well, everything changed. So the model suddenly is broken a little bit. And I think, you know, the people in Toronto, God bless their hearts. Kind of built into the model something to try to address this, and this is the annual review. And you'll see in this report, there's a couple of comments on how that's required now. Every year, we're gonna have to review, not this level of work. It's just a kind of go back to it and say, where's the glaring holes? What's the stuff we've updated? What have we changed? Do we need to change something? Is the 1.5 we have in here now reasonable? Have our circumstances changed enough to revisit that? So there is a bit of a, you know, something built in to try and put you a little bit more at ease at that. But as an accountant, your discomfort, I feel it. Because it's the nature of this exercise is we're really trying to nail down things that we don't even know when some of these things are gonna be a problem. If they're ever going to be a problem. And our reality is legislation and rules and requirements change all the time. You know, we may be mandated to do an entirely different type of water treatment plant when it comes time to replace the water treatment plant. And that's not built into this model either. So, yeah, it's a uncomfortable feeling to put a number on something that we all know is a little bit difficult to calculate, but we're mandated to try it. And, you know, this is kind of our best guess, I guess. You know, it's a well-educated guess. It's based on facts. It's not, you know, we chose a smoothing model over 20 years at 50%. But it is still based on what we know now. To the best of our knowledge, that's how we came up with it.
Thank you. Counselor Shabba and then Counselor Kylie.
Yeah, to you, Madam Mayor. I really appreciate this because it is a baseline for discussion and it was for whatever it is that we want to talk about. And looking at some of this, the PLOS and remodeling for equipment, even with funding at 100%, we're still gonna get, something like 50% condition. So we know it's unrealistic to fund it 100%. So again. You can target for 50% with that condition. I'm happy with that. So I mean, the unknowns are always there. Variances are always there. So I mean, we do have a reserve to try to help us accommodate those things there and there if we can. And I mean, we're really stuck between a hard road, you know, Marcus and a rock. I think the same, so the government is not gonna give us any more money, as you see from AMO that you guys want to. And they are not increase taxes because people have had it with taxes. So what do you do? What do you do? So I think to me, it's a good document for us to have. For discussion, baseline for discussion. And should there be any unknowns in future or variances in future, I'm sure we'll find a way to take care of it. Best as we can.
Thank you for those comments. Counselor Kylie?
So your worship, even looking at that 50% model, I think about the 10 or so years on council. Council, over the years, not just this council, but over the years has been reluctant to set aside money in reserves towards future expenditures as on infrastructure as we have here. And I think as a council, we really have to look at that. We know we hate adding a couple of percent per year on taxes, that money is not gonna be used immediately, but setting aside for future development, repairs and infrastructure needs. It's a cold hard fact. We don't like to add that 2%. I'm just using that as a measurement tool, but I think we've got to come to grips with it because even at a 50% level, there's a lot of money that people should be set aside. So, I'm hoping this council will see the light on that. And it's a disciplined approach, but it's a need. Thank you.
Through that, Mayor. Yeah, you know, the comment earlier was, we haven't even hit the 50% historically, and if you look at that graph, we have order of $1 billion that was slated to be replaced or upgraded or repaired before 2025. So, you know, the reality is, you could put a 30% tax rate increase in, and we still would fix the model. We're just trying to get to something that keeps, you know, water pipes from bursting and, you know, roofs on buildings and, you know, our reality that we face as a northern community, so.
Anything further from members of council? Nothing noted. Does anybody require the motion to be reread? All in favor? Opposed, that item is carried. Item number 6.2, municipal drinking water license renewal 2025 to 2031 financial plan approval. This one will be delivered by Director of Public Works Stefan Forte, moved by Councillor Kylie, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens.
Be it resolved that report number 25 PW 19 entitled Municipal Drinking Water License Renewal 2025 to 2031 financial plan approval be received. And that in accordance with Ontario Regulation 453.7, under the Safe Drinking Water Act 2002, council approves the Kirkland Lake Drinking Water System Financial Plan for 2025 through to 2031 as presented, and that council authorized the mayor and chief administrative officer to endorse the updates made to the operational plan for the Kirkland Lake Drinking Water System. And finally, that Kirkland Lake Drinking Water System Financial Plan for 2025 through to 2031 be submitted to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks as part of the town's drinking water license renewal application.
Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. You may proceed.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. The report that I'm presenting today outlines the updated financial plan for the Kirkland Lakes Drinking Water System. And is prepared in accordance with Ontario regulations and under the Safe Drinking Water Act 2022. The financial plan confirms that our system is currently in stable financial position with no long-term debt and a growing reserve fund. It also identifies key capital investments and a funding strategy that relies on modest water rate increases and potential government grants. While the system is financially healthy today, the plan does highlight a steady decline in asset value due to amortization, which we will need to monitor closely over the coming years. As part of the license renewal process, we're also seeking council's endorsement of the updated operational plan, which reflects changes required for reaccreditation and continued compliance. Approval of both the financial and operational plan is a regulatory requirement and is a critical step in ensuring the town's continued authority to operate the drinking water system. I respectfully recommend that council approve the financial plan as presented, authorize the mayor and CEO to endorse the operational plan updates, and direct staff to submit the required documentation to the MECP. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions and comments, Councillor Shattuck?
To you, Madam Mayor. So, reading this report, under discussion, about water rates, 3.3% annual increase. Is that, are we adopting that today as part of that report, or how did that factor in? I see that under discussion on page 2 of 148. Financial plan, discussion financial plan, 3%, 3.3% projected to support operating and capital cost. So could you explain that?
Council. So this is a very similar model to the asset management plan. It's a model based on trying to project our capital requirements, and the difference here between the asset management plan and this model here is this also takes into account operating costs of the water system and future needs for that. So the numbers aren't perfect match. You'll notice that between the two plans, even though they seem to be a match in discussions. I don't think this is a mandated percentage increase. It is our report to the province to renew our license, is that's the rate that would be required to hit all of the, all of the operational and capital needs. We didn't talk about operating at all earlier, so, this rate is, part of it's gonna be buried in our operating budgets year over year, and there's a capital component, which we heard about earlier for the asset management plan. So they're not a perfect match, and they're not like a mandated, it has to be 3.3. But we are mandated to consider it when we're doing our work to maintain the system and renew our license.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Owen.
Yeah, through you, your worship, if I could just comment on that. The inflation rate came out today at 1.9%. So 3.3 is, to me, is close. Trust me, I do not like increases of any type. I don't have the extra cash to pay them. But this is not just a situation in Kirkland Lake. I've talked to people, residents from other communities, and they're all facing the same situation where they're complaining about their water rates being too high. But we must keep in mind that what they're getting for that is a safe, secure drinking water supply. And none of us will forget Walkerton. And so 3.3 is a starting point. It could be higher by the time we do the budget, because this is something that would go through in the budget. But to me, I don't like increases, but it's not unreasonable to me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Owens.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just a question concerning the reserves. It says that at the start of 2025, we had approximately $1 million in reserves. We all know we've had a rough year on the water system. Has that had much of an impact on that reserve? Or are we still sitting at that $1 million mark?
My short answer is, I'm not sure. Well, because we're only partway through the year, and our whole contribution to the reserve is based on what the bottom line is. in any particular year, what we raise in revenue, less what we spend in that system. That amount that's left over goes into the reserve automatically. And I don't know what that is, we're 9 months into the year, you're right, we've had some pretty good challenges this year. So it wouldn't be particularly shocking if we had a lower number being contributed this year, but at this point, I'm not sure enough to say it's blown the model away. I don't think it has, it doesn't look like it from the last numbers I was looking at. But it's certainly, well, much like the discussion earlier about modeling, this, we could have good years, bad years, just, but they're assuming we're kind of steady, where our reality is, we're never steady, we're up and down.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dykens?
To you, Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering, have we ever investigated where we're losing all our water? Like we talk about it all the time and we're losing over 50% of our water. I just wonder if we have started that investigation or we know what's happening.
Thank you for that.
Through Madam Mayor. Investigation into water loss is ongoing. The reality is that we don't have enough water metering in town to really make that assessment. I think it's premature to say that we're losing 50%, and I know that's something that I've reported on before. The more that I look at it, it's unclear because we don't have any metering system for every single property in town, so knowing exactly where the water is going is unknown at this time. We have an aging system, but we're unable to isolate an area and say, well, this is where we're losing water. At this time, I don't have any more information to provide on that specific topic. We don't have an answer. We don't know if it's due to leaks or simply because we don't know where the water is being used. Without everyone being metered, it is very difficult to assess.
I understood that at one point, we were looking for funding so we could invest. I didn't think water meters would be the answer. I never heard, yeah, I thought we were looking for funding, so that we could do a comprehensive, report, because we can guess, we can put in water meters, but still that might not be comprehensive. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Nothing further. Do we require a rereading? No, all in favor? Opposed and noted, item carried unanimously. Item 6.3 supplemental 2025 proposed alternative capital works projects paving contract award. This will be presented again by Director of Public Works Stefan Fortley, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens.
Be it resolved that report number 25 PW 20 entitled supplemental 2025 proposed alternative capital work project award be received. And that council hereby award the contract to Miller Paving Limited for paving services in the amount of $922,403.27 plus HST. As outlined in the scope of work identified within 62325 RFT, including the amendment of replacing Brown Street with Allen Avenue from First Street to Tower Street. And that the mayor and municipal court be authorized to execute the contract and any related amendments proposed in favor of the municipality without detrimental impact in the form satisfied to Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Public Works. And finally, that the execution bylaw be brought forward for 3 readings on September 16th, 2025 in accordance with subsection 22IB of the town's notice policy.
May proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, again, Madam Mayor and Council. As you'll recall, on August 19th, Council endorsed the recommendation to proceed with asphalt resurfacing at 10 locations across Kirkland Lake and Swastika in lieu of the deferred water main relining project. Following that direction, a request for tender was issued and it closed on September 4th. Miller Paving Limited was the sole respondent, submitting a bid of $922,403.37 plus HST, which is within our original budget estimate. This allows us to move forward without requiring additional funding. The original scope included Brown Street, which we recently realized is scheduled for storm sewer replacement. We are recommending a substitution with Allen Avenue from First Street to Tower Street. This change is cost neutral And ensures that we're not resurfacing a road that will soon be disturbed. Pending council's approval, construction is expected to begin later this month. Public notices will be issued in advance of each phase and updates will be shared through our What's Going On Here initiative. I respectfully recommend that council approve the contractor work to Miller Paving and authorize the necessary bylaw for execution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Counselor Kylie?
Yeah, through you, your worship, Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought we had a deal with, Miller Paving. That, they were bidding on a 2 or 3 year contract in advance. For, paving. Am I wrong?
For you, Madam Mayor,
This amount here, we're talking, this is for the year, right?
this is for this year.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe that in the past, before my time, I believe that there was such arrangements for paving services that would last multiple years. It's not something that I've encountered yet since I've been here. I don't know if we pulled away from that or if that's something we want to re-entertain for the years to come.
It's worth looking at, I guess that's the question.
It might be worth looking at. I'm not convinced that it would be for these larger projects. I'm not sure if that would be more for paving services, more like patchwork. To cover up our excavations. That is something that we can look at.
Thank you.
Counselor Shabba?
Director, you indicated the start date of this, if this goes through, what is the duration of this, how long is it gonna take? Is that a month or two, or what of these various, streets that have to be done? Just thinking about winter coming.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, winter is definitely on our radar. And it's anticipated, we're hoping that everything gets completed by the end of October, no different than the Connected Link project.
Anything further? All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Thank you, sir. Item number 7, consideration of notice of motions. There was one item deferred, Councilor Janice Ranger, implementation of crosswalk at 25 Tweetsmere Road, 2026 budget. Item number 8, introduction and reading and consideration of bylaws. 8.1, bylaw number 25-059, moved by Councilor Shabba, seconded by Councilor Ranger.
Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor municipal clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 2559 being a bylaw authorizing the execution of a lease agreement over target mining claim L 2678 for Peltier.
All in favor? Opposed? Item carried. Item number 8.2, bylaw number 25-060, moved by Councilor Casey Owens, seconded by Councilor Rick Owen.
Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor municipal clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 2560 being a bylaw to appoint a chief building official, property standards officer, and municipal law enforcement officer for the town of Kirkland Lake.
All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Item number 8.3, bylaw number 25-061, moved by Councilor Ranger, seconded by Councilor Kylie.
Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor municipal clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 2561 being a bylaw authorizing the execution of an agreement with Miller Paving Limited for 2025 pavement program services as identified in 62325 RFT.
All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Item number 8.4, bylaw number 25-062, moved by Councilor Shabba, seconded by Councilor Rick Owen.
Be it resolved that council receive the following: the recommendation from the committee of the whole made on August 26, 2025, the procedural bylaw survey report presented at a public meeting held on September 16th, 2025, and the comments, questions from members of the public at a public meeting held on September 16th, 2025, and that the following bylaw be read, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and municipal clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 2562 being a bylaw to provide for rules governing the order and proceedings of council and the committees of council of the corporation of town of Kirkland.
All in favor? Opposed, item carried unanimous. Item number 9, questions from council to staff. There were none submitted prior to this meeting. Item number 10, notices of motion. Now noted at the table at this time. Item number 11, councilors report, moved by Councilor Ranger, seconded by Councilor Kylie. Are there any reports from council members about items in the community, anything they've done? Councilor Owen.
Yes, to you, your worship, I attended the Tech Pioneer Committee of Management meeting. And I think the most significant thing that came out of that meeting is that Councillor Janice Ranger was elected as the chair of that committee. So Councillor Casey Owens had been the chair, but you can only stay in the chair so long. And so we're moving ahead. We got like you said, we got like 98% capacity, I think it is. 98 point something. I don't know about the point person, but anyway, so Janice is now the new chair.
Well, thank you for that. Councillor Casey Owens.
Thank you, through Madam Mayor, so long, Madam Mayor, on Friday night, I went to the coal miners hockey game. Two things stuck out to me, and the first one was the new Olympia, but I love toys, I love gadget wheels, whatever it has, and this one's new, it's shiny, it's very quiet. And so it was nice to see that we finally got it after waiting so long to get it. The second thing notable from that night was the hockey game. I've been going to hockey games in that arena for the better part of 7 or 8 years now, and if not longer, and I haven't seen good hockey like that in a long time. I'd like to congratulate the new management of the team for the money, the investment they've put into that hockey team. They've rebranded, they've resurrected the team, and they've come up with a really awesome product that the whole community can be proud of and stand behind. And I hope the community does stand behind this because they are the Kirkland Lake name out there. Kirkland Lake is known for hockey, and they will be traveling part of the province, so I think it's worth supporting them. So again, congratulations to the new management of the team for a job really well done.
So anything further from members of council? Follow up, Councillor Owen.
Yes, through you, your worship, I meant to mention this earlier. I'm very pleased to note at open council meeting that the private swim lessons at the community complex are now back on. I was the director for that. I used to think private lessons were for kids who had rich parents. But there's a whole group of kids that have learning disabilities and have problems with socialization that cannot function within a group setting. And those are the kids that are really gonna benefit from the fact that the private lessons are back. And they were up in the air because of a problem with the pool. But that's been looked at, or is being looked after. So again, I just want the public to know private lessons are back on. And if your child falls in that category, you know, get up there and register. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Shall I read the motions? I would give that part.
Did you not? I think.
No.
Okay. No, I have not read it.
It's-
Okay, be resolved that the verbal updates from members of council be received.
All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Item number 12, additional information, 12.1 proclamation Franco Ontarian Day, September 25th, 2025, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Kylie.
Be resolved that council sanction a proclamation for Franco Ontarian Day to September 25th, 2025 in the town of Kirkland.
Thank you. Whereas on May 18th, 2010, the Legislative Assembly of Ontario enacted the Franco Ontarian Day Act 2010, proclaiming September 25th in each year as Franco Ontarian Day. And whereas the Franco-Ontarian Day Act recognizes that Franco-Ontarians commemorate September 25th to celebrate their language and heritage and also take pride in their collective accomplishments. And whereas September 25th is the anniversary of the first unveiling of the Franco-Ontarian flag in Sudbury in 1975. The Franco-Ontarian Emblem Act 2001 recognizes the flag as the emblem of the Francophone community in Ontario. And whereas as by proclaiming September 25th as Franco-Ontarian Day, this act officially recognizes the contributions of the Francophone community of Ontario to the social, economic, and political life of the province and the community's importance in Ontario society. And whereas the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms specifically established French as being the official language of Canada and has been spoken since the 17th century. Now therefore, I, Stacey White, Mayor of the town of Kirkland Lake, do hereby proclaim September 25th, 2025 as Franco-Ontarian Day in the town of Kirkland Lake. I do want to mention that this will be the first year that Kirkland Lake will be flying the Franco-Ontarian flag. All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried. Item number 12.2, thank you. Proclamation, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th, 2025. Moved by Councilor Rick Owens, seconded by Councilor Ranger.
Be it resolved, the council sanction a proclamation for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th, 2025 in the town of Kirkland Lake.
Thank you. Whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, released its final report on June 2nd, 2015, which included 94 calls to action to redress the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. And whereas all Canadians and all orders of governments have a role to play in reconciliation. And whereas recommendation number 80 of the TRC calls upon the federal government in collaboration with the Aboriginal peoples to establish as a statutory holiday, a national day for truth and reconciliation to ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential school remains a vital component of reconciliation process. And whereas in 2021, the federal government declared September 30th as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, National Orange Shirt Day, and established this date as a statutory holiday. And whereas September 30th has been reclaimed by survivors as a day to listen to the stories of these affected by the residential school system, to celebrate the inherent value of Indigenous peoples and their cultures, and to reflect on the ways in which our society must improve in order to better uplift and respect Indigenous peoples living in Canada. And whereas the town of Kirkland Lake supports taking concrete action towards reconciliation and believes that acknowledging National Day for Truth and Reconciliation as a municipal statutory holiday is an important step in supporting both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples' ability to engage with and understand the value of Indigenous history, culture, and tradition. Now, therefore, I, Stacey White, Mayor of the town of Kirkland Lake, do hereby proclaim September 30th, 2025 as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in the town of Kirkland Lake. All in favor? Opposed? Item carried unanimous. Item 12.3, Northeastern Public Health Community Merger Update. This was provided by NEF. Is there any speaking notes on this? So it is 4 pages long. It is well worth the read to just figure out where we're standing now in this voluntary merger. All in favor? Sorry, moved by Councillor Kylie, seconded by Councillor Shava. All in favor? No, let's have the reading of the motion. I'm just skipping right through.
The result of the additional information entitled Northeastern Public Health Community Merger Update be received for information.
All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Item carried unanimous. Item 12.4, sanctioning council reappointments to the Kirkland Lake OPP Detachment Board, moved by Councillor Owen. Oh, sorry. At this time, I'm going to ask acting mayor Pat Kiley to take the chair in my stead. Thank you, sir. I'm just so eager to get done this evening, apparently.
You said you go for the rest of them to read it.
And we have a seconder. Councilor Casey Owens, back to you.
Be it resolved that council sanction the reappointment of Mayor Stacy White and Councillor Janice Ranger to the Kirkland Lake OPP Attachment Board for the remainder of this term of council.
Any wish to speak on behalf?
So thank you for, acknowledging acting mayor. I just want to note that due to some confusion, we did want to make sure that we were starting the board on the right foot. So all members, community members from the five communities that are involved are reappointing and reaffirming their members to the board so that we can move forward. So it's just a formality at this point.
Any further comments? We have a motion to approve. All in favor? Motion passed.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm not speaking on that this evening.
Just curious. Good, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, at this time, we are going to take a brief recess before moving into, in camera. Thank you. So we're reconvening after our recess to move into closed session, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens.
Be it resolved that council adjourn in camera pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss the security of the property of the municipality or local board, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local boards. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board at 5:59 PM. For the following reasons, item 13.1 resignation and public appointments to committees of council, various, item 13.2 human resources update.
All in favor? Opposed?
Sorry.
Item carried. Thank you. We'll now reconvene from in camera, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Kylie.
Be it resolved that council reconvene in open session at 6:23 PM.
All in favor? Opposed, none noted, item carried unanimous. Item number 14.1, appointments to committees of council, moved by Councillor Ranger, seconded by Councillor Shava.
Be it resolved that Brian Topless be appointed to the Committee of Adjustment for the remainder of this term of council. And finally, that Emma Arthur be appointed to the Kirkland Lake Economic Development Advisory Committee for the remainder of this term of council.
All in favor? Opposed, none noted, item carried unanimous. Item number 15, confirmation bylaw number 25-063, moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen.
Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and municipal clerk, and the seal of the corporation be fixed thereto. Bylaw number 2563, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meetings held Tuesday, September 16th, 2025.
All in favor? Opposed, none noted, item carried unanimous. Item number 16, I move for adjournment, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens.